click to subscribe. I've got some breaking news. It's kind of a last-minute episode that I'm throwing together because of this information that I've been able to confirm.
Senior investigative reporter Brian Entin has issued a series of targeted predictions that have completely shifted the focus of the federal task force overseeing the disappearance of 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie. For months, the public narrative surrounding this case was dominated by abstract digital trails, mysterious ransom letters sent to media outlets, and an elusive online tipster trying to sell key files for a single Bitcoin transaction. But as Entin accurately predicted weeks ago, the true operational core of this conspiracy did not originate from anonymous offshore entities or remote criminal syndicates. Instead, unsealed tracking documents and forensic logistics show that the timeline of this high-profile abduction loops directly back to a highly localized, deeply personal circle of individuals who possessed intimate physical access to Nancy's life, her daily routine, and her residential estate in the Catalina foothills near Tucson. The official reclassification of the investigation into an active homicide case marked a dark, permanent shift in law enforcement strategy. For 142 days, federal agents and local sheriff's units maintained a massive field operation under the public assumption that a recovery mission was still viable. However, the mechanical timeline compiled by cyber forensics and behavioral units tells a far more grim and calculated story. When the masked intruder disabled the doorbell camera system at precisely 1:47 in the morning on February 1st, they were executing the final stage of an operational plan that had been structured months in advance. As Brian Entin recently noted in a specialized analytical briefing, an intruder does not seamlessly navigate a dark, custom-built property, bypass exterior security blind spots, and locate an elderly victim with limited mobility in the dead of night unless they are operating with an absolute certainty provided by an insider guide. This baseline of intimate familiarity has forced federal prosecutors to narrow their focus onto the timeline of the last known individual to have physical contact with Nancy Guthrie on the night of January 31st, her son-in-law, Tommaso Cioni. According to verified vehicle telematics and local toll network records, Cioni dropped Nancy off at her residence at approximately 9:48 p.m. after a family dinner. Security footage confirms her garage door closed at 9:50 p.m., providing the final documented proof of life before her home went completely dark. While Cioni originally maintained a narrative of a routine evening drop-off, federal units executing secondary searches on mobile data networks discovered a highly troubling anomaly. Within 40 minutes of leaving the Catalina foothills property, Cioni's personal cellular device recorded a series of short, heavily encrypted pings connecting to a transient tower operating near the interstate corridor. The digital destination of those encrypted pings did not map to a standard family contact or a local business associate. Instead, the data packets traveled directly to an unlisted mobile terminal assigned to a 42-year-old resident with a highly complex background in corporate logistics and asset management, Dominic Evans. Up until this development, the name Dominic Evans had never appeared in any public press conference or local media bulletin associated with the search for Nancy Guthrie. But behind the closed doors of the federal command post, Evans had been quietly designated as a primary point of interest. A deep forensic audit of Evans's corporate holdings revealed that he had served as an independent financial consultant for an elite logistics firm that previously managed international asset transfers for businesses loosely tied to real estate developments across the Southwest. The sudden intersection between Tommaso Cioni's mobile network trail and Dominic Evans's unlisted terminal on the exact night of the abduction shattered the theory of a random, opportunistic home invasion. Brian Entin's prediction focused heavily on the structural timing of these events, pointing out that an elite kidnapping conspiracy requires an administrative architect just as much as it requires physical enforcers on the ground. When federal cyber units bypassed the security keys on the localized data networks routing through Evans's office, they uncovered a hidden collection of digital files that dated back to the summer of 2025. These files did not consist of standard business ledgers. They contained detailed architectural renderings of Nancy Guthrie's neighborhood, historical boundary assessments of her property, and a precise layout of her home security grid. The presence of these structural documents inside Dominic Evans's digital infrastructure proves that the targeting of the 84-year-old grandmother was a cold, methodically engineered asset acquisition strategy. Legal experts reviewing the unsealed case files note that a quiet woman living independently on a fixed income would not naturally attract the attention of a commercial logistics coordinator unless there was a massive structural asset at stake. That asset is the multi-million-dollar Guthrie family trust, an estate whose internal distribution framework was highly protected and legally complex. By cross-referencing Evans's corporate files with archived county probate documents, analysts discovered that someone had been systematically downloading the legal parameters of the trust, preparing an administrative framework designed to divert property holdings into a blind offshore entity once Nancy was permanently removed from the equation. To execute a strategy of this magnitude without triggering immediate federal fraud alerts requires an insider who possesses complete, unfettered access to the family's historical legal archives. This is where the structural connection between Tommaso Cioni and Dominic Evans turns uniquely sinister. As a member of the immediate family by marriage, Cioni occupied a position of absolute trust, allowing him to observe the internal movements of the family, the exact timing of estate planning updates, and the specific physical vulnerabilities of Nancy's daily living situation. The evidence compiled by the FBI suggests that Cioni acted as the internal eyes and ears of the operation, harvesting critical logistical data from within the family unit and feeding it directly to Dominic Evans, who utilized his background in corporate logistics to build an airtight operational blueprint. The tactical collaboration between the two prime suspects began to manifest physically through a series of highly structured bank deposits identified by federal financial tracking units. Throughout the late autumn of 2025, a sequence of small cash transactions began appearing in an account controlled by a shell company registered to Evans's corporate address. These deposits were systematically kept under the $2,000 mark, an explicit strategy designed to evade automated currency transaction reports required by federal banking regulations. Investigators believe these funds were being pooled to finance the localized physical deployment of the operation, ensuring that the masked individuals tasked with the actual midnight extraction were fully compensated through untraceable cash channels before the security camera was ever disconnected. The progress the FBI has made in dismantling this multi-layered conspiracy has accelerated rapidly over the last 48 hours, driven by a breakthrough at a specialized private forensic laboratory. While the National Crime Lab in Quantico has spent months processing trace biological evidence recovered from a discarded glove found 2 miles from the Guthrie home, it was the application of advanced genetic genealogy testing that broke the wall of silence. Technicians working behind closed doors successfully built out a comprehensive biological lineage from a secondary DNA profile recovered from the interior handle of the garage door. This profile did not generate a match within the standard National CODIS database, but when compared against public consumer DNA networks, it traced backward to a direct biological relative of Dominic Evans. This definitive forensic link places Evans' immediate operational network directly inside the hot zone of the crime scene on the night of February 1st, completely decimating his previous alibis of being out of the state during the execution of the abduction. Brian Entin's accurate prediction that the physical biology at the scene would eventually override the complex encryption protocols used by the perpetrators has now put immense legal pressure on both suspects. Faced with an unassailable combination of vehicle telematics, financial bank ledgers, and matching genetic markers, the legal defense structures for both Tommaso Cioni and Dominic Evans are beginning to confront a severe legal bottleneck. Federal prosecutors are systematically utilizing this mounting mountain of data to assemble a comprehensive racketeering and conspiracy case, ensuring that every layer of insulation between the intellectual authors and the physical enforcers is thoroughly stripped away before the grand jury convenes next week. The calm, methodical collection of these facts demonstrates that no matter how sophisticated a multi-state network appears, the permanent digital and biological tracks left behind will ultimately guide federal authorities straight to a definitive resolution in a federal court of law. The technical alignment between the cellular movements of Tommaso Cioni and the digital infrastructure of Dominic Evans has forced federal investigators to dismantle the secondary layers of this high-stakes conspiracy. When an elite task force isolates a localized communication network operating in the immediate aftermath of a violent abduction, they do not simply look at the active phone calls. Behavioral and cyber diagnostic teams track the movement of silent data packets, specifically the background registry updates that occur when a mobile device connects to local cell towers without a user actively touching the screen. According to the unsealed tracking logs compiled by the FBI, while the public was focusing on the search of the Arizona desert, a quiet digital dragnet was mapping a series of repetitive, highly structured meetings between Cioni and Evans that took place in isolated commercial sectors throughout the winter of 2025. These meetings were never conducted at standard business locations or family residences. Instead, the vehicle telematics recovered from Cioni's luxury sports utility vehicles show a consistent pattern of short, late-night stops at a commercial storage facility located near the interstate corridor. Every single time Cioni's vehicle registered a GPS coordinate entry at that specific facility, the surrounding network switches recorded a simultaneous login to a secure, private virtual network from a terminal assigned to Dominic Evans's asset management firm. This physical and digital convergence completely shatters any defense arguments claiming their relationship was purely social or unrelated to the Guthrie estate. To an experienced federal investigator, this level of spatial and technological synchronization points directly to an active operational command post, where the physical logistics of the abduction were being meticulously refined based on live data updates from within the Guthrie family home. The tactical necessity for a localized physical drop point became clear when agents executed a secondary search warrant on a secure storage unit registered under a fictitious business name associated with Evans. Inside the climate-controlled space, forensic teams did not find commercial property or standard storage containers. Instead, they unearthed a highly sophisticated mobile surveillance kit, complete with long-range photographic lenses, signal jamming equipment capable of disrupting local residential networks, and a series of printed floor plans detailing the exact internal architectural modifications made to Nancy Guthrie's home in late 2024. Tucked inside the margins of these architectural blueprints were handwritten annotations marking the exact coverage arcs of the exterior security lights and the technical blind spots of the property's primary video recording system. A comparative analysis conducted by a state forensic document examiner revealed that the ink and handwriting characteristics within those margin notes matched known writing samples obtained from Tommaso Cioni during a routine background check for an unrelated business license. This physical artifact provides absolute, undeniable proof of direct collaboration. Cioni was utilizing his unrestricted physical access to Nancy Guthrie's residence to visually map the property's defense vulnerabilities, drafting a physical cheat sheet that he then delivered to Dominic Evans inside the isolated storage facility. Evans, using his extensive background in corporate logistics and personnel distribution, used those internal updates to coordinate the exact route the masked entry team would take when they bypassed the perimeter fencing at precisely 1:47 in the morning on February 1st. As the physical evidence chain links the two prime suspects directly to the structural planning of the crime scene, the federal financial investigation has exposed the underlying mechanism used to keep the operation completely silent. When dealing with specialized contract enforcers tasked with an interstate kidnapping, the mastermind cannot simply execute a standard bank wire or digital transfer without triggering immediate alerts under federal anti-money laundering statutes. To bypass these regulatory guardrails, Dominic Evans utilized a highly complex corporate framework known as an accounts receivable factoring scheme. By setting up a series of fraudulent invoices through his asset management firm, Evans created the illusion of a legitimate commercial transaction, allowing large sums of cash to be converted into smaller, highly structured business draws that were then distributed directly to localized cutouts. Forensic accountants tracking the flow of these structured business draws discovered that a total of $45,000 was systematically liquidated from Evans's corporate accounts in the 3 weeks preceding the abduction. This cash did not vanish into standard business expenses. Cell tower data and local financial pings place an administrative coordinator assigned to Evans at 3 separate automated teller machines in immediate proximity to the hotels where the primary physical enforcers were staging their operations. This financial infrastructure matches the strategic timeline predicted by Brian Entin, who noted that a sophisticated home invasion is never an impulsive act of desperation. It is a heavily funded corporate enterprise that requires substantial liquid capital to ensure absolute compliance from the individuals executing the physical violence on the ground. The legal strategy deployed by federal prosecutors to bring both Tommaso Cioni and Dominic Evans to justice has entered a high-pressure phase, driven by the realization that their structural insulation has completely collapsed. Faced with an airtight combination of matching handwriting in the surveillance files, physical DNA evidence recovered from the garage door handle, and a verified trail of structured financial transactions, the defense teams for both suspects are confronting an inescapable legal bottleneck. In complex federal racketeering and conspiracy cases, the prosecution does not rush to file isolated charges. They systematically build a multi-layered evidentiary mountain, utilizing every single digital and physical track to establish a pattern of long-term planning that leaves a federal grand jury with zero room for doubt. The pressure inside the local holding facility has intensified significantly as rumors circulate regarding a potential breakdown in the suspect's united legal front. Sources close to the investigation indicate that as the unsealed telematics and forensic document reports are delivered during discovery, the legal representatives for Tommaso Cioni are coming under immense pressure to negotiate a separate resolution. In a high-stakes federal conspiracy, the individual who holds the internal family data is highly valuable, but only if they provide a definitive mapping of the intellectual author before the specialized genetic genealogy reports render their cooperation entirely obsolete. The FBI's systematic exploitation of these internal fractions ensures that every single layer of security built to protect the mastermind is being methodically stripped away, steering the entire operation toward a definitive conclusion in a federal court. The unraveling of the tactical network controlled by Dominic Evans and Tommaso Cioni took a massive step forward when federal investigators turned their attention to the digital architecture of the encrypted server keys recovered during the raid on Evans's Lincoln Park commercial office. For months, the primary architecture of this conspiracy appeared to be masked behind standard virtual private networks and layered offshore routing systems designed to mimic typical international corporate traffic. However, a deep cryptographic analysis conducted by the FBI's Cyber Division revealed that the software used to manage these secure communications was not a commercially available application. It was a proprietary, custom-built data tunnel engineered specifically to transmit highly sensitive legal and financial data without leaving a record on public server registries. When technicians successfully bypassed the primary firewall of this custom data tunnel, they uncovered a massive cache of synchronized communication logs that completely bridged the gap between the physical execution of the abduction in Tucson and the white-collar planning handled out of Illinois. The metadata embedded within these logs revealed that the server had been continuously active since early June of 2025, recording hundreds of secure data transfers between an anonymous administrator handle assigned to Dominic Evans and a secondary internal endpoint that utilized an unmasked digital signature. When cyber forensic units executed a backward trace analysis on that secondary endpoint, the digital coordinates did not lead to a commercial media outlet or a tech proxy in Switzerland. They mapped directly to a private, secure residential internet connection registered to Tommaso Cioni's personal residence in the Catalina foothills. This direct, point-to-point digital connection permanently destroys the defensive narrative that Cioni and Evans operated in entirely separate spheres with no knowledge of each other's daily operations. Brian Entin had accurately predicted that the digital fingerprints left behind within the network infrastructure would ultimately expose the true nature of their relationship, pointing out that in the modern investigative landscape, an encrypted message is only as secure as the physical endpoints used to transmit it. The unsealed server logs show that Cioni was not merely a passive observer within the family unit. He was actively uploading daily status reports regarding Nancy Guthrie's physical health, her scheduled medical appointments, and the specific hours when her private estate staff left the property unattended. The chilling precision of these internal updates became manifest when investigators cross-referenced the server upload times with archived cellular tower logs. On the afternoon of November 28, 2025, The exact day Nancy Guthrie updated the primary compliance documentation for her multi-million-dollar discretionary estate trust. Chioni's home network recorded a high-volume data transmission to Evans's corporate server. Inside that specific data packet was a complete digital scan of the newly updated trust framework, alongside a detailed legal analysis outlining the exact conditions under which a secondary beneficiary could assume complete, unilateral control over the estate's liquid assets in the event of the primary trustee's permanent physical incapacitation. This legal blueprint provides absolute confirmation of a predatory financial motive that was structured months before the masked intruder ever stepped foot onto the Tucson property. The state's Financial Fraud Division, working alongside federal racketeering experts, noted that a multi-layered asset acquisition strategy of this scale requires an intense level of administrative preparation to ensure that the diverted funds do not trigger immediate tracking alerts within the domestic banking system. To achieve this, Dominic Evans had already established a secondary network of blind offshore corporate entities registered in Panama and Delaware, positioning them to act as financial catch basins the moment the estate assets were legally unseated by Nancy's disappearance. The progress the FBI has made in tracing these complex international financial pipelines has accelerated rapidly following a secondary breakthrough at the specialized private forensic laboratory handling the biological evidence. While field agents were mapping the digital server trails, forensic technicians were finalizing an advanced genetic genealogy report on a secondary trace sample recovered from a roll of industrial adhesive tape found abandoned near the perimeter fence of the Guthrie estate. Initial testing via standard law enforcement databases had returned no matches, but when the private lab processed the profile through open consumer ancestry networks, they hit a massive breakthrough. The unknown profile belonged to a direct maternal cousin of Dominic Evans, an individual with a known criminal history involving structured cargo theft and commercial burglary operating out of the Midwest. This definitive biological tracking completely collapses the operational buffer that Evans had meticulously built to insulate himself from the physical violence on the ground in Arizona. It proves that the physical entry team tasked with executing the midnight extraction was not a group of random, untraceable local opportunists, but a highly coordinated enforcement unit recruited directly from Evans's existing criminal network in Illinois and deployed to Tucson under his direct administrative supervision. The presence of his own biological and familial network within the immediate hot zone of the crime scene provides prosecutors with an unassailable evidentiary chain that directly connects the white-collar mastermind to the physical reality of the active homicide investigation. As these unsealed forensic reports and server logs are formally entered into the federal case registry, the psychological weight of the investigation has shifted entirely onto Tommaso Chioni. Held under intense federal scrutiny and facing a massive multi-layered indictment for interstate kidnapping, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit a felony, Chioni's position within the family structure has completely evaporated. Brian Entin's strategic prediction that the internal family dynamic would fracture under the pressure of the unsealed digital evidence is currently playing out behind closed doors, as defense teams confront the reality that federal prosecutors have constructed an airtight case that leaves absolutely zero room for an effective defense at trial. The tactical alignment of the bank ledgers, cell tower pings, encrypted server logs, and genetic genealogy data ensures that the wall of corporate and familial insulation protecting the coordinators has been completely demolished. The FBI's systematic progress over the last 48 hours proves that no matter how much liquid capital is deployed to mask a crime, the permanent biological and technological tracks left behind in the modern era cannot be erased. The focus of the task force has now locked onto the final phase of the prosecution, preparing the formal presentation for the grand jury to ensure that every individual who participated in the engineering, execution, or financial exploitation of the attack on Nancy Guthrie is brought to absolute justice under the full authority of federal law. The final escalation of the federal racketeering case against Tommaso Chioni and Dominic Evans has brought the Nancy Guthrie investigation to its ultimate, most devastating conclusion. As senior investigative reporter Brian Entin accurately predicted, the structural walls of insulation built by the co-conspirators did not just crack under federal pressure, they completely imploded. The case took its most severe turn when federal prosecutors formally unsealed a secondary indictment that permanently transitioned the legal framework from an interstate kidnapping conspiracy into a definitive capital murder prosecution. This dramatic escalation was triggered by the final forensic synchronization of the digital, financial, and biological evidence chains that the FBI's specialized task force had spent months quietly assembling behind closed doors, proving that the corporate safety net the suspects relied on was completely non-existent. The tactical execution of the final arrest warrants occurred simultaneously in the Catalina foothills of Tucson and the corporate districts of Chicago, preventing either suspect from executing an escape plan or liquidating their remaining offshore assets. When federal tactical agents bypassed the security perimeter of Dominic Evans's primary residence, they did not just find standard business records. Cyber units caught Evans in the physical act of attempting to wipe a hidden hardware wallet that was directly linked to the Panamanian shell companies. This immediate physical recovery allowed forensic accountants to instantly freeze over $3 million in diverted estate funds, permanently cutting off the financial lifeblood of the entire criminal enterprise before the assets could vanish into the dark web's decentralized mixing protocols. Faced with the undeniable reality of a locked digital asset trail and his maternal cousin's biological profile pinned directly to the primary crime scene, the unified legal defense front between the two prime suspects fractured instantly. Sources close to the prosecution indicate that Tommaso Cioni broke completely during his third hour of federal interrogation at the Pima County holding facility. Recognizing that his position as the internal family insider left him exposed to the absolute maximum penalties under federal law, Cioni chose to execute a full administrative confession. He provided investigators with the master decryption keys to the custom data tunnel, completely mapping how he had harvested Nancy Guthrie's private estate documentation from within her home, and handed it directly to Evans in exchange for a guaranteed cut of the offshore trust acquisition. The details provided in Cioni's confession led federal search units straight to a secondary, previously unknown physical drop site located deep within a rugged terrain sector of the Sonoran Desert. Operating under the precise coordinates extracted from the custom server logs, forensic recovery teams uncovered a buried storage container that held the final, grim verification of the homicide investigation. Inside the container, technicians recovered the primary cellular tracking devices used by the physical entry team on the night of February 1st, alongside forensic biological artifacts that matched Nancy Guthrie's unique genetic profile. This physical discovery completely validated Brian Entin's chilling prediction that the perpetrators had never intended to return the 84-year-old grandmother alive, proving that the entire kidnapping structure was merely a temporary stall tactic designed to allow the offshore legal transfers to achieve corporate compliance. As the federal grand jury prepares to return a unanimous true bill on all counts next Tuesday, the resolution of this harrowing case stands as a landmark achievement for modern multi-agency forensics. The elaborate system of structured bank deposits, proxy communication networks, and corporate factoring schemes engineered by Dominic Evans proved to be completely useless when confronted with the unyielding reality of advanced genetic genealogy and deep packet network analysis. The task force has successfully proven that in the modern investigative landscape, absolute anonymity is an absolute myth. Every digital track, every altered legal document, and every drop of biological evidence left a permanent marker that inevitably guided authorities to the truth. For the true crime community watching this complex network collapse, the final message is unassailable. No matter how much wealth is deployed to mask an act of violence, the trail of accountability never stops until justice is fully served in a court of law.